Well, welcome back. In this video, you will see some of our footage from our recent trip to Athens. And this footage is going to include some really neat things. At the end of the video, you're going to see a traditional Greek meat market. For some of you, some of those sites may be a little off-putting, especially if you're vegan or vegetarian, but it's quite fascinating. It's just a beautiful street-level look at a part of Athens and part of Greek life. A little later in this video, you will also see the changing of the guard. That takes place at the tomb to the unknown soldier. This commemorates all of those who fought in the War of Greek Independence against the Ottomans and won back the sovereignty and right of the Greeks to be Greeks and to be under Greek rule and to be Orthodox and Greek. And so it was quite solemn to see the changing of the guard, so you'll see that in a few minutes. Of course, what you're looking at now is our walk to the Parthenon, something that has been standing there for about 3,000 years. Here's a little friend we just happened to see. I've always loved reptiles and amphibians, so when we saw that little guy, we just had to take at least a little bit of footage of him. But of course, here we are back walking at the wall. Today's message is about contending for the faith in public. Christianity is not just a private spirituality. It is a way of living. It is a way of ordering our life and our collective lives together. It is a way of doing community and family. It creates a culture around itself. And so Christianity is a public faith, which means that it's not something we can just hide, and it's not something we can just be secretive about. At some point, we have to make a public contention for the faith. We have to make a public claim for the faith. So let's just think about what Paul did in Greece. Corinth was the economic center of Greece. And so Paul has to go there because it is the major trade port. It is going to be the place from which people are coming and going, and it's going to be a way of getting the gospel to the whole world. Philippi was one of its most important Roman colonies. It is an outpost of Rome. It is a center of power and prestige, military might. And so, of course, Paul is going to take the gospel to Philippi. But Athens, small as it was in the first century, was the intellectual center of Greece. Now, Athens did not become the official capital of Greece for some time, but Athens was historically the intellectual center, and it was there on Mars Hill, where you see me now, that Paul made an intellectual appeal for the sake of the gospel. Mars Hill functioned as the Supreme Court of Attica, the region around Athens. It was also there that intellectuals such as philosophers went to discuss and debate important ideas. In Acts 17, we read that Paul makes a journey to Mars Hill, to Athens, to make an intellectual appeal for the gospel. It reads, "While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, 'What is this babbler trying to say?' Others remarked, 'He seems to be advocating for foreign gods.' They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, which is Mars Hill, where they said to him, 'May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean.' All the Athenians and foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting at the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that you are in every way a very religious people. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world, everything in it, is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands, as if needing anything. Rather, he himself gives life to everyone, and breath to everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history, and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him, and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not very far from any of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine is being of gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design or skill. In the past God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead." When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. New Testament scholar N.T. Wright tells us that the religious choices of Paul's day were basically the same as the choices we have today. The options included: 1. Epicureanism. Epicureanism is the belief that there is a physical world around us. There is no transcendent reality beyond it. The natural world is all there is. This is materialism. Then there's paganism. Paganism is the belief that the world is a chaotic battleground where many spiritual realities compete with each other for resources, survival, and dominance. Then there's Gnosticism, a belief that a select few are special enough to be in touch with the universe and who follow its lead by self-realization and acceptance of their true self, which is the conduit for channeling the spiritual impulse of the universe. Platonism. Platonism, which some people confuse with Christianity, is the belief that this world is an inferior reflection of thought and spirit. The goal of Platonism is to endure this world and to someday escape it so that we can enter into a world of spirit and thought. Sometimes Platonism makes room for an impersonal God who mostly stays out of the affairs of the world, and sometimes it does not. Then finally, we have biblical theism, the belief in a good, all-knowing, all-powerful God who created this world as something good. This God loves this world and has a plan to redeem it. He is constantly at work in this world, yet not overwhelming the choice and direction chosen by his creation. When Paul began to contend for the faith, he started out with the premises many of his audience would have agreed upon, such as the fact that the world has a creator, that we have the spark of eternity within us. However, it was when he got to the idea that God is at work in the world that his audience started getting a little resistant. But the matter got worse when Paul told them specifically what God had done and would do to redeem the world. Someday, God will renew the entire world in a final resurrection. As a sign of that hope and promise, God has raised the Messiah back to life after being crucified. It was at that point that most of his audience concluded that Paul had lost his mind. Everyone knows that dead men don't rise again. They also know that God will do nothing to stop the decay and deterioration of this world, which will one day be destroyed or simply fade away. It does not seem that Paul won the day or that he made many converts at Athens. Nonetheless, he was faithful in giving a robust, enthusiastic account of the faith. While most of us are not intellectuals or theologians, each of us can contend for the faith. And for most of us, we do not even have to leave our lane or move beyond our field of expertise. C.S. Lewis, while not perfect, was a sincere follower of Jesus who tried to practice what he preached. In an address to church leaders and clergy entitled Christian Apologetics, Lewis exhorts Christians to influence the world around them by striving for excellence, truthfulness, and integrity in their work. Lewis lived this out as a scholar by writing what is still considered to be the authoritative text on 16th century English literature with the creative title, English Literature in the 16th Century, Excluding Drama. Not a popular book, but the best book in its field. He writes, "While we are on the subject of science, let me digress for a moment. I believe that any Christian who is qualified to write a good popular book on any science may do much more than by any directly apologetic work. The difficulty we are up against is this. We can make people often attend to the Christian point of view for half an hour or so, but the moment they've gone away from our lecture or laid down our article, they are plunged back into the world where the opposite position is taken for granted. As long as that situation exists, widespread success is simply impossible. We must attack the enemy's line of communication. What we want is not more little books about Christianity, but more little books by Christians on other subjects, with their Christianity latent. You can see this most easily if you look at it the other way around. Our faith is not very likely to be shaken by any book on Hinduism. But if whenever we read an elementary book on geology, botany, politics, or astronomy, we found that its implications were Hindu, that would shake us. It is not the books written in direct defense of materialism that make the modern man a materialist. It is the materialistic assumptions in all the other books. In the same way, it is not books on Christianity that will really trouble him. But he would be troubled if whenever he wanted a cheap popular introduction to some science, the best work on the market was always by a Christian. The first step to reconversion of this country is a series produced by Christians which can beat the Penguin and Thinker's Library on their own ground. Its Christianity would have to be latent, not explicit, and of course its science perfectly honest. Science twisted in the interest of apologetics would be sin and folly. What if it were known that the best works on any given field, whether it be education, law, business, military, government, sanitation, disposal, politics, etc., was always done by a Christian? Would that contribute to the defense of the Christian faith? Would that attract others to looking into what it means to follow Jesus? Proverbs 22:29. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men.